So depression during pregnancy is happening in 1 out of 5 cases of pregnant women, or at least 1 out of 5 women during pregnancy have symptoms of depression during their pregnancy. And 4 to 7% of pregnant women are experiencing major depression. And you can imagine that for these women, it's sometimes necessary to take antidepressants, especially when they are suicidal. The use of antidepressants during pregnancy has dramatically increased the last decades, and it has doubled, which means that in the Netherlands, about 1 to 3% of pregnant women are taking antidepressants during pregnancy. And in the States, that's even up to 10% of all pregnant women. But before I go into whether that's safe to use or not, I really want to stress out that maternal depression also has an effect on the child. So if you look at children that are being born from mothers that were depressed during pregnancy, we can see that at 18 months old, they have developmental delays. And if you look a little bit further, when they are about 4 years old, we can see that there are some problems in social behavior, and also that these children have emotional problems. And if you look even further, which you can imagine, if a mother is depressed, of course, genes also play a role, but the risk for the child to become depressed later in life is increased by 4 to 7 times. So that means that we can say we can use antidepressants to treat the very heavily depressed mothers, but we have to keep in mind that if we don't do it, this also has an impact on the child. So if we look at antidepressants, what we can see is that the most commonly used antidepressants are SSRIs. And SSRI is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which means that serotonin cannot be reuptaken by the presynaptic neuron, and serotonin is increased in the extracellular cleft. Well, that means that if you take antidepressants, SSRIs, that you disrupt this system, and this also has an impact on the child. For instance, it has been shown, or it's mostly in news nowadays, that mothers taking antidepressants, they have a higher risk with children developing autism spectrum disorders. So this risk is doubled. But like I mentioned, maternal depression also increases social deficits. So the question here is it better or worse to use antidepressants during pregnancy? And to answer that question, we have to know, of course, what does serotonin? Serotonin is a crucial neurotransmitter, which is in the development very important. It helps with the cell division, migration of neurons, synaptogenesis. So we can imagine that if we are messing up with the system, that also our brain development is disturbed, or at least developed in a different way, and that this might have impact on behavior. Well, is it then better to use antidepressants, or is it safe to use antidepressants? To answer that question, we have a rat model in our lab, and we have a rat model for depression. So what we use is a rat that is depressed, and we just look what is the effect of a depressed mom on social behavior in the offspring. And besides that, we also treat this mother with SSRIs and see what the effect is of the treatment on a depressed mom on the offspring. So that's comparable to the human situation. But the good thing is we have rats, so we can also treat healthy women with antidepressants, or healthy females. And there we can compare all these results, and we can see what is really the impact of the SSRI, and what is the impact of a depressed mom, and is it then good or not good to use antidepressants? Well, we have looked in males and females. Since women are depressed twice as often as men, we thought it's good to also take into account the sex perspective. And we looked at different ages. When you look at very young rats, they really play a lot with each other. And if you then look at children or pups that were exposed to an SSRI during pregnancy, we see that the social behavior is decreased. We see that both in males and females. And then when you look when they're a little bit older, around 10 weeks old, young adulthood, we still see in males that they are less social interactive. But we don't see this in females, which is interesting. And for males, We also, even later on, checked them for the aggression behavior, which is also a certain kind of social behavior. And we see that they are also less aggressive. So if you put an intruder into the home cage of this rat, it takes longer for this rat to attack this male than when you have a normal pregnancy. For the females, it's interesting to note that the maternal depression actually increases the social behavior. So that's something we didn't expect and what was really surprising. So to understand these mechanisms, we are now going into the brain. We are looking at gene expression, but we don't have any results on that yet. But to conclude whether it's safe or not to use antidepressants, well, there is a risk. So social behavior is influenced by antidepressants, and it seems to be infecting males more than females. But we need to go further into more research to figure out whether that's really good or not to use. So that was what I wanted to say to you today.